So yeah, I think we can begin. So hello Anna, welcome. So everyone, welcome to this seventh Frugal Innovation Hour. So it's like I said, it's a follow-up of last year's initiative for a Frugal Innovation Day. And so this year we are having 1-hour meetings with experts from different domains. So we had Belina, who was our second speaker, who spoke to us about improvisation for saving the world and ourselves. And I was in confinement for the last, I didn't go out for the 1.5 or 2 months, and I had built up high expectations of how the world would be outside. And I was in my own world of utopia, and like, wow, when I go out, everyone would be smiling and birds chirping and an excellent, everyone would be happy. But just day before yesterday, I stepped out for work for 2 hours, and I was really disappointed that by the time I came back, I saw there was already a traffic jam. People were just carrying on with their normal lives. So I thought probably I hyped it up too much. But on the other side, I think it brings back a lot of hope that we're in the right direction, and the people that have not yet begun this transformation or who have not accepted yet the change that we're going through have something to look forward. And I think today that's what we are all looking forward to, as to how we can, at our individual levels, contribute as well as at a systemic level. So, and we have two experts with us today, Professor Christian Berg, who is part of the presidency of the German Club of Rome. He's a professor in sustainability. He's a speaker, author. He's worked in sustainable finance, and I'll let him introduce himself in a bit. And we have Shanta Nandi, who's the founder of Finding Sustainia, a think tank, which is, and there's also a blog with it, and it was voted Germany's best sustainability blog, and she's known as the mindset blogger as well. And she's part of the think tank 30 of the Club of Rome, and she became an influencer with her 30-day sustainability mindset challenges. And so, Shanta, if you want to tell us what is Sustainia and a bit about yourself.
With a lot of pleasure. I'm very happy to be here and see quite a few known and not yet met faces. Sustainia, you've just mentioned two elements, and that is high expectations on the world, and followed by disappointment, and the same high expectations on yourself, which can be followed by disappointment.
Yeah.
I found myself in that state after I finished my law studies. I had specialized on European environmental law, and I wanted to make the world a better place. I was hopeful. I spoke 5 languages and a few more, and there was the financial crisis. So first of all, I didn't get the jobs I wanted to. The jobs I got offered were working at an NGO for free, or working in the building industry, avoiding environmental laws. So there was that. Then there was that part in me who was very passionate about the environment, but I always came to my own limits, in that sense, to my own barriers, that I felt, but what I associate with a good life, meaning traveling internationally, eating out and having all of that, was in a kind of contradiction with what I perceived as sustainability. You know, there are these very specific areas such as mobility, nutrition that influence our footprint. So I was in that moment where I could just get desperate, either try but exhaust myself, or just give up. And this is where the term Sustainiya came to me, and that is an utopia I strive towards. And I give my best, but I do it from inside. And at the same time, I stay loving and generous towards myself and my own needs. And these 30-day challenges had something very powerful to them. And that was that I just focused on one little aspect. And that is for 1 month being plant-based, for 1 month being zero waste, for 1 month not, looking at my mobility options. And that really changed something in me. First of all, because there was just this 1 month aspect, I could see that it's really doable, and a lot of habits just stuck with me, and also with our community, because what I did was with someone called Anna Maya, who's my sparring partner. And I can really say having a sparring partner is a wonderful thing. And a lot of things just stuck with us, and they didn't add a sense of deprivation, but actually plenitude. So that path towards Sustainiya just brought us closer to it. And Sustainiya doesn't seem to be like that mountaintop that we spoke in that introduction to this webinar, but it's something to strive forward to, but it doesn't make you feel small. And that's also what I find so interesting when Christian talks about Futeranity. For me, Futeranity is Sustainiya also on that systemic collective level. And maybe Christian, you could talk a bit
Perfect.
more about
that makes a good transition to Christian.
Yes,
so
exactly.
what we'll do is I'll let Christian present himself, and then this is we're going to experiment with a new format, which is going to be a conversation between Shanta and Christian. So Christian, what is Futeranity? Because today's subject is future of Terra and humanity. And as Shanta said, we're trying to make utopia something more accessible to us, instead of it being something really theoretical and far away and utopic, as the term suggests. So what is Futeranity for you? And just tell us 2 words on who you are.
Yes, thank you, Abi, and thank you very much for having me and having us today. It's really a great honor and fun to meet you guys. Futeranity, the future of Terra and humanity, that's what I would consider the ultimate goal, what we should all strive for, and what we should actually be able to agree on as well. The problem with the previous concepts of sustainability is that they set such high targets, and sustainability as a target is so complex, it's so difficult. And as Shanta has just explained from her own experience, people are often overwhelmed by the complexity, and therefore it's really good to reduce the complexity and to just limit yourself to certain aspects, what Shanta tried with this 30 days experiment. I think we need, on the one side, a complex analysis of the situation. That means we need to understand what are the reasons that make it so difficult for us to achieve more sustainability. But on the other side, being concrete in our suggestions, what we can do, what you and I can contribute. And therefore, I develop in the book we will be talking about, in the first part, I investigate the barriers to sustainability, what prevents us, and there are a lot of barriers, and number from great variety of different kinds of barriers actually. And in the second part of the book, I develop action principles, what you and I can do, and not only us as individuals, but also corporations or NGOs, what we all can do to come closer to this ideal of sustaining the future of Terra and humanity.
Great. So, like you saw, there's this book that has come out recently on sustainable action, overcoming the barriers. So, I think Shanta, you can get the conversation going. And if people have questions, you can just put them in the chat box and we will take them after this conversation.
This work, Christian, that we have been collaborating on has been extremely inspiring for me, and this is why, because I meet the professional persona of you in the context of the personal one. So talking about someone who has a lot of background and expertise on sustainability and is a very nice person at the same time. And I feel that it's very important in our society to embrace both and not try to make them contradict each other that much. Such as that if we become more embedded in these feminine values of empathy, collaboration, that doesn't mean we need to stop looking for advancement in technology and of humanity. And I believe that's also what Futeranity implies. And I'd love to ask you of your more concrete and personal version of Futeranity, and completely bearing in mind that each of us can only offer an approximation.
Yeah, thanks for the question. If I understand you correctly, you want to know what I personally consider as the ideal way to approach life. Yeah, I think...
On a systemic level.
Pardon me?
On a systemic level.
Systemic level. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in times of crisis. These days, we're in times of pandemics, which has never, at least in this this magnitude, has never occurred before. And I think today many people realize that we cannot continue with our current path of ever expanding, ever faster, ever more efficient. And actually, we realize that this striving for efficiency, this kind of being even almost mad about being efficient, getting things done, outsourcing everything to very remote places, is now firing back to us, because we're now realizing that we cannot sustain our own societal needs, our own food, our own technology, everything we depend on. And I think this has, I mean, with all the tragic aspects of this pandemics, I think one element is really important, that we need to realize that we need this kind of a reset. You know, what is really important for us as humans, but also as a society. And not sure if that really answers your question, but I think we need to overcome, or to, first of all, to realize what is important to me. For instance, I realize how precious relationships are. I mean, my personal family, but also relatives, friends, and we're all in need of that. And we realize how precious and maybe undervalued they were in the past. So we will need to come to a new appreciation of relationships, but also question previous habits or previous trends, as I said, towards ever greater efficiency, and defining ourselves by the product, not so much by inner motivation or inner values.
What so, I find...
If I'm asked back, you thought a lot about the relationship between kind of mindset and external result. Maybe you can explain a bit from your side what you had in mind with Sustainia, and how the kind of your inner values affected or contributed to the success of changing habits and changing lifestyle.
So what I have identified in myself and in a lot of people, and I'd even be so bold to say in our society, is that we see soft values in opposition with success. We feel if we don't push on, if we're not product oriented, that in ways lead to failure. And this brings us to a point, so we really measure success. I mean, you and me, we have both accomplished a certain success, and we have made our names. We can live from our work, and at the same time, now these are our professional personas right now. I mean, we're now in. I mean, I'm sitting in my sleeping room, but in general, we have these professional personas. But even us who like to be very open and soft, do have I feel there's a kind of we are kind of cut apart in that sense that we try to not let our personal human sides very much interfere with our professional personas. And you've just said about that our society is focused on product, and at the same time we don't embrace vulnerability. We don't see a CEO saying that, oh, I don't know, or we are going to do this, but I'm not quite sure what the outcome is going to be. And for us, if what I've very down to earth identified in individuals is they are willing to be more sustainable. But if you tell them go all plant-based, this is going to scare them. And this is why they will say no. It's not because they don't want to do better, but just this fear aspect blocks them. And just from a neuroscience perspective, when we are scared, blood goes into our legs and our arms because we want to fight or run. And I feel we are a society very much blocked and in this fight and flight mode. And by integrating, showing vulnerability, by being more empathetic, that it's actually nice to focus on collaboration and including our team members and make them shine. Actually something which can change our society from inside without too much seeing sustainability as that goal.
Yeah, I fully agree. So, and I think what you just said points to the fact that the sustainability transition needs also to be a cultural transition. Yeah. So we see in the book, I have a barrier which I consider a societal barrier or social barrier, conflicting interests. People have different interests, and if you belong to a minority group, you will realize how much discrimination there is. So normally, women are much more aware of the kind of of the privilege or privileges they do not have compared to men. Or people in the so-called developing world are much more aware of the colonial heritage they have than people in the previous colonial states or nations. So I think we have here this this problem of culture, and we definitely need to come to a new culture. And we see first trends about in this, in business, for instance, that mindfulness is being much more appreciated in many companies these days. Being mindful, being respectful, being integrative, these more soft values are even pursued by men, luckily. But at least in Germany, if I look into the leading companies and the big corporations, it's embarrassing how little diversity we have. Not just gender diversity, but also regarding other parameters. So I think definitely it's a cultural change that we need to trigger, to work on.
There are a lot of studies that show that giving employees the option of doing home office is actually beneficial to their productivity, even to introduce a 4-day week. At the same time, employers, it's not that they are completely opposed to it, but they're far too scared of that outcome of letting people free. And I feel that's a huge issue in our society, that we feel we need to control and that we can't trust. And you know, for instance, in little villages, no one will just litter because it's something that's not done, something you don't want to. But if you don't litter because you'll be heavily fined otherwise, that instantly changes the motivation. And for that, I'd really love to ask you for a few concrete measures that could help us to also push forward that transformation on a systemic level, talking about internalizing negative external effects and other aspects that could also support the individual to rather embrace these inner aspects as well.
Before I respond to that, let me first share some kind of anecdote which was reportedly happening to Mother Teresa when she was visited by, I think it was an American manager. He said, "My goodness, what you are doing, I wouldn't do for $1,000 per hour." And she just replied, "Me neither." So that shows, this dedication to the work she was doing was not at all driven by monetary financial incentives. I mean, that would actually ruin the whole thing, the whole idea. And this, I think, is nicely describes that we're so much driven by this efficiency madness in a way. Efficiency in a way gives us monoculture. Monoculture is actually an oxymoron. It's a contradiction in itself. Culture is always multi, it's always diverse, it's always pluri. It can never be mono, it can never be single. But this is exactly the result of our obsession with being so efficient. And therefore, I think we need to have we need a multi-policy approach, of course, to get to come to terms with global commons, like littering, as you mentioned. I mean, on the one side, we need definitely higher fines. So in insurance industry, risk is always a product of likelihood and sanction, or the penalty. So if you have very little likelihood of being detected, you don't really bother. And or if the penalty will be too low, you care even less. That leads to the fact that many companies rather pay fines instead of behaving properly because the fines are so low. So we need to increase that. At the same time, we need to work on the attitude of people and make them aware of the costliness and the wonders of creation, the wonders of nature, and that this needs to be protected. So we need to come from different angles, and then I always think that a phase transition can be facilitated if you trigger certain parameters at the same time. If you only work on one issue, if you only work on diversity, if you only work on gender, if you only work on climate, and leave out all the other aspects, don't see the interconnection of the issues, then you will fail. You will not succeed. Let me maybe add one more example. Colleagues from us in the Club of Rome have a few years back suggested that one should give money to women who have, by the age of 50, not given birth to any child, or at max one child. And the logic was, every additional consumer consumes resources. Now, humanity, societies, and us as human beings, we are not triggered as technical systems. You cannot just change the input, give less birth to children, and then you have a better result. That doesn't work like that. And I'm afraid that people or women who might have very strong relationship to their kids, but don't really understand climate change or the other sustainability issues, they might rather turn away from these guys making these suggestions and turn to the populists who say there is no climate change, because they are disgusted by this suggestion, although it might be in the best intended suggestion. So the point here is we need to be aware of the complexity of the issues, see the interrelations, and don't come up with too easy, too quick solutions in our analysis. But in our kind of practical approach, we need to come to concrete operational principles. not really sure, Santa, if that responds to your question. Maybe you.
No, it does. It actually makes me. It makes my head go into thinking mode. So what I really find interesting is, and I completely agree to it, that we need to have pretty strict systemic regulation and at the same time trigger intrinsic motivation. Sometimes with the start of extrinsic motivation. I know you and me don't completely agree on that one, but there needs to be freedom for the individual to decide for the better, and at the same time that individual really needs a systemic background which fosters that. And what I find amazingly important is that we start with our little kids, that at school they're already in that environment where the empathetic kid is also recognized for who he is, and where it's not just dependent on that nice teacher seeing that, but where it's actually where, let's say, meditation, mindfulness, and all these practices and creativity practices, not just this if you get that math equation right, you'll do well, but actually finding ways to really trigger creativity. And as you also mentioned in your book, this is the German version, also create a soil where kids, even especially the city ones, be in touch with nature, and where their love for nature is triggered as well, because that's also a barrier that you very correctly identify in your book. And yeah, I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're so distant to nature. I mean, more of a human population is living in cities these days, and some people have really lost any connection with nature. There are studies that longitudinal studies made in Tokyo about early childhood experience in nature, or at least in nature, quote unquote, in parks, some nature environment, natural environment. And there are two critical parameters that influence the later, 15 years later, grown up attitude towards the environment. One is positive experience in nature or natural environments, and second is, interestingly, the attitude of the mother towards the environment. So these two show how critically important it is that we expose little kids, we expose everybody to nature. You can only protect what you love, and you can only love what you know. So we need to have exposure to that, and then it doesn't need to be a remote island somewhere in another continent. It can be even the flower in your garden, or on your balcony, where you can really realize the miracles of nature.
Vivian, Vivian Ross, she just asked a good question, that is, what concrete actions we propose. Maybe I can start. I would like to say that from my now pretty long experience, that sustainability is a win-win for the planet and for us as an individual, and of course also for the system. If you eat more plant-based or use safe packaging, it has a lot of good effects on your health, on your well-being. If you go less into consumption, that also means you need to work less, you have more time to enjoy. If you then invest your money into creating a better time, for instance, through investing in a babysitter, or just investing in a theater ticket. And there's quite a bit of studies on that, which show that actually the benefits on your well-being are much bigger than if you had invested that money on a product. Another thing is that if you work less, that means you have time to cook, to repair, and all of that will also have positive effects on the planet. And because I've been doing this work, and of course in the beginning it was more for being a better citizen, to understand sustainability much more, I can really say that my life has greatly benefited from it. And also I've seen very similar effects in the community. And what is very important is it doesn't mean you have to do everything at the same time, but first of all, open yourself to it. Accept that you don't need to be perfect. Just take it as an adventure, and then certain habits will stick with you. And everyone is a bit different. For instance, Anna, who has done the challenges with me, she loves a bit of cheese every now and then, and I prefer the egg. And it's just that everyone has different preferences, and we can also embrace them in our strategy to sustainability. Another more concrete measure is to work on mindfulness without even thinking too much on sustainability. We have Giorgio Rizzi here from the Heart Math Institute, and he has a lot of really effective and small techniques that can really make you be better in yourself, and that will help you to not burn out, because while we're talking about the planet and the resources ending, there's a very high increase of burnout rates, which I believe are very much linked to this fast-paced, product-oriented society. So that again would have positive repercussions on our healthcare systems. And this is a huge and big subject. If you let me, I can rant on about an hour, but time is brief. I know, Abi. I think Abi just asked you, Christian, what actions organizations can take. So what I just said was home office and giving more trust to employees, to tickle out their intrinsic motivation and make them be interested and motivated. And now I let Christian have the word.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there are a lot of what I call them principles that are can be applied to actors of different level and different kind, and also to corporations. One is, for instance, increased diversity. We see this, as I just said, it's such an important principle in nature, but we see that diversity is, on the one side, avoiding boring order, but on the other side, avoiding structureless chaos. So it is the tiny little edge where the interesting things happen, where innovation is taking place. And that requires some kind of diversity. If you only have one monoculture in any respect, also in corporations, then you cannot really be innovative. Another one is increased transparency. A lot of problems these days occur because people have hidden agendas, because we're not explicit in what we actually want. And that is a problem in cases of lobbyism, in cases of corruption, but also in personal relationships. And here, being transparent and seeking mutual benefit and win-win are, I think, important principles. Everybody, every person, but also every corporation can follow. And then there are, of course, the well-known principles like we need to follow decarbonize, local sourcing, seasonal sourcing, reduce meat consumption as an individual or as a corporation in your canteen, seek alternative menus, or such things. I structure the principles in different kind of fields or different types. I first say we have nature-related principles like the ones just mentioned, decarbonize. Then we have personal principles, which apply to us as human beings. We have societal principles like seek win-win. And then we have systemic principles. Actually, one of the most important, hands-off complex systems. Complex systems are so difficult to deal with because you cannot steer them, you cannot manipulate them, you can at best hope to influence them in the right direction. And we're dealing, as humans, we are dealing with a great variety of complex systems in nature, in socio-technical, natural systems, that we need to be very, very careful in interfering with them. There are dramatic examples of human intervention. We probably all know that World Health Organization were fighting DDT in Borneo in the 50s, and that led actually to the parachuting living cats over Borneo because there were so many different side effects involved that eventually WHO reached the opposite of the intended effect.
Yes, it's very difficult to find a one fitted all solution where all the 17 SDGs, as you also point out in your books, can be fulfilled. There are a lot of contradictory needs, but it's important to start. And what is very important, in my opinion, is that we start to make the sustainable option the easiest. As you say, that the eco mode is the mode on your printer or on your washing machine, but also that organic products, plant-based products are cheaper. Because right now in our Western culture, it's not like that in India. Meat, sweets, crisps, these kinds of things are actually cheaper than getting some veggies. And there's just something inherently wrong about that. And if our pricing more realistically represented the true costs for the environment and for our health, we'd also make a big step. And flights shouldn't be that dirt cheap. I'm sorry to say that, but there needs to also be I find that trains are the more sustainable option must be cheaper as well. For instance, if you take the train from Paris to London, it's 2 hours. A plane can't top it, but there are still people flying it because you can just get it for 20 euros. And I'd love the system and the international community to work on that. There are a few questions. There's one from Franz. He says, Christian Berg has emphasized the need to stop thinking in efficiency terms. An alternative would be to broaden our notion to efficiency and realize that what we so far took to be efficient, it as GDP growth, is in fact inefficient in terms of a broader, more inclusive notion of efficiency that takes into account the effect on the environment, other aspects. Which of these two approaches, giving up efficiency thinking or broadening efficiency thinking, would you ultimately favor? Should both be combined? Christian, I think that's a question for you.
I mean, I don't have a problem with efficiency per se. I have a problem with that we allow efficiency to dominate everything. There are many realms in life, many areas in life where efficiency doesn't make sense. I mean, if you paint a picture or if you play a piece of music, it doesn't mean to say, well, or there's no point in saying, well, this is not efficient. I mean, culture is that which is appreciated because it is nice, it is rewarding, it is enjoyable. Of course, if I want to do my homework, if I want to clean up my house, then efficiency has its legitimate place, but not in all aspects, not in all areas of life. But maybe we need to follow up one-on-one. I'm aware of time, and I saw some other questions in the chat. I don't know, Shanta, if you manage. I cannot do so much reading while I'm speaking, so maybe.
I did a little bit of reading. So in terms of efficiency, I'd like to say the same thing that I also said to success. We need to redefine our mental notions of success and efficiency, because I think there's a kind of efficiency if we manage to integrate many different aspects into our individual personalities, but also in our systemic personalities, where we can be the nurturing mother who wants to cook and breastfeed for their kid, and at the same time still give talks. Sorry, that's an individual example. But the same for you, Christian. I was talking in the beginning that, I mean, I've known your work for quite a few years. You are Christian Berg, a leading figure in the German sustainability world. So I admired you, but talking to you and exchanging more with you just also gives me that personal aspect, you know, where I know, oh, you can only talk for half an hour because then you'll cook lunch for your boys. And actually that makes me like you even more without decreasing the admiration I have for your work. But if admiration means we put a person on a pedestal and forget they also just cook with water and sometimes need to use the bathroom, then there's something wrong with us. We need to go more into loving and embracing people for who they are. And I have quite a few amazing people here that I work with, that I'm friends with. And what I love about these relationships, I can talk about Abby or Giorgio or Alice or many other people that are here, is that we embrace that the other shines and is good at what she is doing. At the same time, also embrace their fragilities, their the sides that they can still work on. And that's, I find, a more authentic relationship to the individual and to the system.
Yeah, I think, Shanta, a presupposition or a precondition for being able for engaging in such relationships is that you have a sound understanding and good relationship with yourself. And so that's where everything starts. And earlier you said something about fear, you know. I think many people, I mean, us included, me certainly included, are driven by fear in many cases. And that's probably not the best motivator. Or motivation. So it's good to have to work also on this inner balance, that you know who you are, you know what you want to achieve, and you know that you have to have your own targets in life and not follow others just because everybody asks for that. One of the authors whom I really benefited a lot from was Thomas Merton, an American Trappist monk. And he said, people are so busy climbing up a ladder throughout their life that by the end of their life, they realize that they are on top of the ladder, but it's leaning towards the wrong wall. Mm. So we are so efficient getting things done, but nobody asks about the know why. So we're concentrating on the know-how, but nobody asks the know-why. And this is really what we need to work on. And I think also what the current crisis can maybe facilitate, that we ask these questions of our own identity, of meaning, of our place in this world, and how we can contribute to make it a better place.
Yes, it's about having that confidence to get out of that hamster wheel. And Kelly just asked a very good question, and that is that so we are now a very privileged circle talking about this, and we have the means, we have the information. And she just had that example of low-income families who buy Coca-Cola as a treat for their kid, and of course that's a very complex question, and I can only give some approximative answers, and that is again making the sustainable choice the cheapest, the easiest one, and at the same time also change our society's narrative, where it's actually cool to take the bicycle, where it's cool to buy healthy stuff for your children, where it's kind of where we create the kinds of reference points, because we as humans, we live from reference points. We feel great if we have the best bicycle, but we don't feel good if someone then has an electric bicycle. So it's something we do compare ourselves. We have a tendency to not just be happy with what we have, but with what we have in comparison to others. And there are ways to work on that, but it's, let's say, a weakness of our human nature. And if we see on social media and on TV the kinds of examples that promote sustainable living, I think this would be one efficient mechanism to counterbalance that tendency. I don't know whether they.
I think that my concern is that we sort of live in this bubble, you know, and that it's not really accessing the reality of many people who are so far from this kind of thinking.
That's very interesting. There's another question. Maybe Pauline, maybe you can ask it in the room, or what do you say, Abi? I've maybe hijacked your moderator position, and I know we are friends, so, and you let me get away with it.
What I suggest, I think they're really good inputs, and I think we can. I had a couple of questions, but then I think I think people can just unmute themselves and ask their questions. So from what I hear and sense from both of your points of view and your expertise, from Shanta from a personal point of view, and Christian from your systemic point of view, I see this as a fractal approach to change. Like you said, this whole sustainability transition is a cultural transition. And I see that we as humans, we are like the smallest part of it. And if it's not just work, it's not just play, it's not just sleep, it's not just food, but it's all of this together. And we had the emphasis of like this. So I think this, if we ourselves, like if we have the 17 SDGs, if we think of the 18th SDG to just change ourselves and like act from a higher purpose, and if we can just focus on individuals, that would impact the systemic part, like companies, if they empower individuals, it would benefit the organization. And if on a personal level, I give my time for charity work or for gardening, for anything, similarly, a company could contribute to the common good. And similarly, governments would contribute to the general welfare. So I think, as Franz also mentioned, he's a mathematician and economist as well, and that this obsession for, and like you said as well, this obsession for quantifying results and having this binary approach view of things of good and bad. I think we need to have a tertiary approach to things, and they can be a third answer. So I think it's about just being comfortable with uncertainty, with inefficiencies, while being aligned with who we are. And so this part of inner sustainability and external sustainability. So if Christian or Shanta, if both of you want to, Christian, if you want to say something.
Yeah, I saw in the chat a question about what this could mean for corporations. And I think, I mean, corporations, we see trends in the corporate world towards more transparency, for instance, regarding sustainability reports. You see this taking place now since 20 years or so. We see more awareness about discrimination. We see more awareness about mindfulness. I mean, you can all argue, well, is this just PR, or do they really make a point here, or do they take it seriously? And I think we see pressure coming from several different angles, from different stakeholder groups. And therefore, I think sooner or later, corporations will have to change and will have to not only to be measured in terms of jobs and maybe taxes, they more or less pay, some avoid that even, but also to the fact, do they contribute to build up natural capital? Why should they only build up financial capital? And we see the trend towards integrated reporting, that we combine sustainability and annual financial reports. And I'm sure many of you will know that Puma sports company 10 years ago issued the first environmental profit and loss account. And this was actually by Jochen Zeitz initiated, who later moved to France, I guess. And this was a very interesting endeavor, because they calculated their negative impact to the environment to 145 million euros in 1 year. And the consequence of this is, of course, that needs to be reduced. It needs to come down to zero sooner or later, or, if even better, build up positive natural capital. And I think corporations will prosper if their employees, if their workforce can prosper. And so it all comes together. You know, if you have a happy workforce, if the people in the employees have a good work-life balance, if they realize they are contributing to the resolution of problems and not to making problems in this world, they will also be more motivated and contribute to the success of the company. So I think there is a lot companies can do and are actually doing already, but that needs to be supported by the state and by civil society, by all of us.
This basically answers the questions of Monique and also Vivian. That is that on the one hand, we need to have radical systemic imposed barriers. So the system in itself cannot do whatever it likes, but rather we need to impose certain constraints and rules. So for instance, something like the option of home office once a week, or different other things that benefit employees. It could be something that can be imposed from outside. And also I think this Corona time is interesting because it has shown that home office is actually pretty nice, and we don't always need to fly far away for a meeting. And at the same time, one of you said something like, so it's be the change that you'd like to see in the world. Yes, we as individuals, we are also under the responsibility to push forward change. And once we arrive at critical mass, of course, the market will also follow suit, but it's not just the individual's responsibility. It's a relationship and interplay, and we are all responsible. And it's very important to not just push it on us, the bad individuals, but also not just on the bad system. I mean, they're dancing a tango. And we do have a say. We can, and I'd like to believe that I have a say, and that my actions, as small as they may be, make a difference. And if they make a difference for me, I feel more empowered by trying to make good decisions. And there have been quite a few questions. Maybe Abi, you could give us a wrap up.
So like Theo was saying that if there's more financial security, people would probably have more time to make the right decisions if they're not in the survival mode. And also probably they are with a narrow mental model. I think that joins also what Alice was saying, that probably we need more systemic leaders, or leaders that can think in a systemic way, or we ourselves need to become systemic leaders. Yes. At our individual level.
It's a lot about, again, the narrative. And already the narrative has changed. So firms cannot just do whatever they like and hide it, because this whole need for transparency has already changed firms in their communications and in their approach. And I think we need to focus even more on that being a responsible player in your field is actually something that will also make you more profitable and popular.
What we can do is, I think there's a big problem with the term efficiency.
Yes.
So we'll do a quick chat storm. If everyone can just put in, if we were to replace the term efficiency, what can we replace it today to change people's ways of thinking? And is there a better word, like in nature, in permaculture? We don't speak about efficiency. Balance. Belina says balance. Effectiveness. Okay. Resilience.
Yes.
Resilience. Yeah. Impact. Absolutely. I think those are very awesomeness. Totally. I think we need to change our vocabulary to start changing smooth cycles. Yeah, we shouldn't use productivity and efficiency, or we could use efficiency, equanimity, compassion. Awesome. I'm liking this. What we can do now is, Mark, if you want to say something.
Yes, I just wanted to react on that specific issue, I mean, the efficiency, by relating the works of two people. First one, his name is Robert Ulanovich. He studied the viability and the durability of ecosystem in nature. And Bernard Lietaer did the same thing for money, currencies. And they figure out that those systems were viable only if they rely on two antagonist dimensions. The first one was efficiency, performance, and the second one, which is opposite, was resiliency, diversity. And they show that in nature, we need twice more resiliency than efficiency for ecosystems. And so they demonstrate, and especially Bernard Lietaer, that our economic system is too efficient. So whenever there is an issue, everything falls down because there is no resiliency. And same for our life. Our life are way too much efficient and not enough resilient. So that raises a big issue. It's an intrinsic issue of our system, and our economic system is not the good one. So we need to have in mind that if we remain in that economic system, the issue will remain the same. So the need is really to switch to something else. Now the question is how to switch. Will it be sudden, and will it be something that we qu'on subit? Comment dire subir? Will it be something that
we need to succumb?
Comment?
Something that we need to succumb to submit.
Submit, I thought.
The subir.
Yeah.
Do we have to submit, or can we be proactive by maybe set up a new way of living together, especially in small villages with new currencies, with new things, so that we can start a new way of producing, a new way of eating, a new way of educating people. So, well, we need really a lot of experimentation on a territorial level, but as well, it can be also on a more systemic way. Like for instance, today we have, there is a very interesting experience with the vegan nation. They are creating their own currency, and it's not based, it's an experiment, but not based on a territory, it's based on values. And the question for tomorrow is that can we invent new currencies that will embed into their ADN or their DNA the values.
Thank you. Mark, can you just put in the name of the two authors or thinkers that you mentioned?
Yes.
And Christian, I think you can answer to this question, and then we'll have Belina, if she can give her piece on biomimicry and permaculture. So Christian.
I think I would like to come back to a question in the chat about the universal basic income, but first regarding resilience and efficiency. I mean, these days I fully agree that we need to have much more focus on resilience, and we can see this and especially in days like this crisis, that we cannot produce our own pharmaceuticals, our own drugs, and this was a result of the efficiency motivation, because we source out everything and basically have very globally spread value chains. There was a question about the universal basic income, or the question, do people at the so-called bottom need to be to have more financial support? And I would definitely agree on that, because there are studies by two British epidemiologists, Wilkinson and Pickett. They had a book out 10 years ago, The Spirit Level, and in that they highlight, or they investigate, how do social problems correlate to other indicators like income or inequality. And social problems, they condense them to one indicator, and these social problems are 9, I think, in total, like obesity, lack of trust, child pregnancy, homicides, imprisonment. So all things as a society you don't want to have. And they correlate this to the wealth of the country. And there is hardly any correlation, hardly any. So there can be rich countries which are having a lot of social problems, and poor countries which have relatively few social problems. But if you correlate that to inequality, income inequality in society, you have almost a linear relationship. So poor countries with a high equality, in society are doing much better than rich countries with a large inequality. And that makes it so, that was really eye-opening for me, that the things really relate to each other. And social cohesion, which is so critical these days. I mean, we have populists all over the globe, and social cohesion is critically important to get any further in relation to social progress and sustainability. But that cannot be fostered if we have such great split in society. So we really need to work on more equitable societies.
I have a feeling that Kelly Saunders, I don't know whether I'm pushing you too much, has quite a few insights on creating systems that are more based on, which integrate human needs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a feminist perspective, I guess. So my my thinking is around feminism. I suppose picking up on your point, Christian, about social cohesion. I'm very interested in this because, you know, as a gender in sort of space of gender, you tend to get very monofocused. It's very true, and so it can delve into being kind of combative. You know, there's a point at which you know, it sort of starts being about men versus women. And what I'm very interested in, and I'm not really answering necessarily your question about systems, but I'm very interested in this idea of exploring gender equalities and perhaps other equalities, you know, with a greater sense of complexity, that things can coexist, you know, that you can have a real feminist fight on our hands, which we do, because the situation for women is completely unacceptable. That's the reality, and it's getting worse. But that can coexist really with the fact that we live with men. We are reasonably harmonious with men, you know, to a certain extent, other than, you know, currently the huge levels of violence around the world. But this is a very, very complex relationship, you know, and so that social cohesion is there to a large extent. You know, I mean, you know. I think women bear the brunt of the lack of it. But I'm really interested in this idea of, I guess, things coexisting, you know, so this feminist fight we have ahead of us, and that has a huge amount to contribute to all that we're discussing, actually. You know, what women can really bring to this now is huge, you know, and I sometimes think it's the only thing we really haven't tried, you know, that like actually tapping into what they can really bring in terms of this soft power, you know, and it depends where you are on the feminist spectrum, whether you're essentialist or you're universalist, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole, you know, like whether you believe that we're different or we're not different, we're lightly different. But I think the reality is that women can bring a huge amount, and this idea of doing all of that, but actually being reasonably cohesive with men, you know, those things are complex. It's a complex thing, but it can exist, you know.
Yeah, Kelly, thanks for asking. And I think this is a nice example how complex actually the world is, because I mean, gender equality has a dedicated SDG, so equitable or equal opportunities for men and women. However, I'm pretty sure that many people would say, is this really a needed SDG? You know, is this a sustainable development indicator we need? Are there not others that are more urgent? And the point is that I'm making, I'm not saying that, but the point I'm making is it all belongs to each other, and you cannot, in a complex system, you can sometimes not even say what is the cause and what is the effect. So in a way, you could argue that if we have a really equitable and gender equal society globally, if we had that we would have much less problems. I'm very sure about that. The problem is, how do you get there? So if you fight, I would say, I mean, sometimes I even call myself a feminist, a male feminist, but and I definitely, you know, live a life where I try to give my wife opportunities to follow her career, and we're both taking care of the kids and so on. But if I insist too much on this, I might reach the opposite, because I maybe don't reach all the people I would need to reach. And I would say, I mean, I'm interested to hear your perspective. I think we have, compared to maybe 10, 20 years ago, we've made some progress in this gender inequality. And one example, which I actually mentioned in the book, is the Me Too debate. I mean, it was just one brave kind of action of one woman, which many followed, that actually led, within a few months, changed the mode of how we see discrimination and how we treat each other globally. That was amazing, you know. The time was just right, and then all of a sudden things changed. And that is actually quite promising for me, that it is possible, change can happen if the time is there.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think, I mean, what it kind of revealed is just this enormous subject, though, this absolute other pandemic, which is violence against women. I mean, this is one of the big issues. If we don't solve this, in my view, I guess, is, and then you talk about things being connected, sustainability being connected, you know, to everything. But for me, like just the sheer like enormity of violence against women everywhere. I mean, that is actually one of the things that we need to solve in order to get to sustainability. And I don't think a lot of people understand. Because women are, like, as you mentioned, actually, that you talked about women's attitudes to the environment being so pivotal to children and how they grow and understand nature. You know, I mean, a woman's position is so integrally connected to our success in terms of sustainability. And so, and I think we're far, to be honest. I think that the Me Too movement was great, and we're getting a new level of transparency and a certain place. You know, the result for Harvey Weinstein was absolutely out of this, you know, water, like, you know, in terms of like that kind of you know, sentence for somebody was really new. So something is definitely changing, but it's the absolute tip of the iceberg. And you know, I study women and mobility, and really just like all around the world, like the stats are just frightening. And so I mean, this is something I think, you know, talk about sustainability goals and it being argued as being something not necessary potentially. I mean, for me, that is just, it's so strange because it's
No, I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying, I mean, I'm not suggesting you, Christian, but like I can imagine that people look at that on the face and think, well, why would, you know, there's other things that are more important. And it's often, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, Kelly, don't get me wrong, for the records here,
Yeah.
I did not say that. I just said that some...
Yeah. I know, it's a common, I think it's quite common.
Yeah, and the point here is I'm fully with you on the goal. And the question is, and I'm probably also pretty much in line with you on the measures. But the point I'm making is that we need to see the complexity. And if you, I was wondering about the climate case, and I stressed this in the book. While the world was discussing, do we need 2 degrees or do we need 1.5 degrees, you know, above pre-industrial levels? All over the world, populists entered the political arena, and all of a sudden, the best negotiations were totally nonsense or totally irrelevant, because if the US, for instance, withdraws from the Kyoto, from the Paris Agreement, that doesn't help, you know. So in order to get really to the transition we need, that's my plea. Let's consider the complexity of the issues and overcome the barriers the complexity of the barriers by addressing each and every barrier, and not focusing on just one.
I totally agree with that, and thank you for that question, Kelly, which brought up this. I think all the questions and remarks are like we're having a passionate discussion, but I have to keep the time as well. And I totally think that this whole transition is about transitioning towards the feminine values of co-creation, humility, and going away from the competitive world and efficiency. I would just like Belina to tell us what she thinks about all this, and then we'll finish with Julia. So Belina.
Thank you so much. Just really quickly, so for the past 5 years, I've been teaching a really compassionate form of stand-up comedy to allow people to feel what it's like when the sponsoring energy of your communication about the thing you care about is love instead of fear. And one of the taglines is, we make vegans nice, but it's basically, it allows people to really talk about with vulnerability and personality and share who they are and talk about the connection that they have in relation with what we're talking about. And the impact of that allows people to not feel attacked who might not have thought about these ideas before, to the person is their most adorable on stage. So you think like, oh, let me hear about it. I don't feel attacked. They seem lovely. Let me think about this in a different way. So it's a really powerful form of communication. Christian, you said that you realize like some of your motivation is fear and that didn't feel right and it should be love. I feel like everything that we do, if we can get that sponsoring energy to be love, it has such a different manifestation in the world and can help us get the shift we're after. Thank you, Abby, for the
Totally.
Such a good comment.
Can't agree more.
Yes, and that's also what I realized made my work relatively successful. I got asked for talks not because I was so good talking about avoiding plastic, but because I was talking about myself. I was talking about my own weaknesses. I was talking about measures I was taking, and because I was just positive and vulnerable, people didn't feel implicitly or explicitly reproached. And I feel that's actually the key of what made Finding Sustainia what it is nowadays.
It's like walking the talk, and totally. And Julia, she's known as Princess Gaia, and she's got a storytelling lab. And do you want to just add one comment or share something that with everything that we discussed?
Well, there's so much I could say, and I think I've written a lot in the chat.
Right.
So for me, it's very important that that the actions we take come from the place in which we are resonating with ourselves, resonating with the world around us, and in which we are very resilient. We talked a lot about people who have no choice but buying a Coca-Cola or depending on income or something. And I think that it's really on the way we change the perspective, the way we perceive the world. So if we change our being a victim of the world and change it into becoming the heroes, becoming the owners of our stories, becoming the owners of the actions we take, then we can all have our part on what is happening on this earth. And then the butterfly effect gets a much huger meaning. So yeah, so I don't know. There's much more to say, but I hope this.
Thank you,
Aren't
Julia.
we already in this Zoom call? Thank you, Abby. An example of this where we talk about serious subjects, but we do it in a positive and benevolent and listening atmosphere.
Totally, as in this is the small change that all of us, the idea is to become as viral as the coronavirus and spread this message. I think we can do better. And I think this amazing discussion with Shanta and Christian it's just like, it's been a wildfire. I think we've never had that many questions and comments in the chat and such insightful discussions. So thank you once again, Christian and Shanta and all of you, each one of you for your contributions. And I'm looking forward to reading your book, Christian, as well. And yes, Christian, if you want to conclude with Shanta.
Thank you very much, Abby, for your kindness and also for the kind words. Now, I just wanted to say I just happened to read through one comment which was directly to me. Please email, because even if I save the chat, I might not have your email. So please follow up, and I will really be happy to continue our discussion offline. Thank you very much for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been a huge pleasure.
So I think it's officially like we've crossed the hour, but if people want to stay on and ask questions, and if Shanta and Christian are available, then I think for another 10 minutes we could have.
Come and switch on your videos. Alice, I want to see your face, and Monique. Oh, and Jessica, you're also here.